Hello! Don't mind me. I've just been talking to myself for a half hour. No big deal. No big deal. Moving right along. Moving right along. uh, totally my fault. I'm so good at screwing this up, I swear to God. I'm so sorry, you guys. Completely my fault. Still wrangling the robots. Still wrangling the robots. Well, let me just get my shit together and start over. Completely my fault. So sorry. I have fully been talking to myself and responding to your comments. Just so you know. Responding to the comments. Fully talking to myself the entire time. That was exciting. Okay. Well, God bless the 4 of you that stayed. There was 6 when I checked a minute ago, so... Whoops. All right. There is nothing that you guys missed. Yeah, right? Thank you. We only have 5 planets in retrograde. Give me a goddamn break. What the hell? Oh my god. All right. Not much that you guys missed from the preamble, especially if there's only 5 people here. You've all heard the preamble, so... You've all heard the preamble. Okay, so let's dive right in. Welcome to class. Hi. Dirt. Thanks for trying to call me, Rachel. I appreciate it. Okay. What are we dealing with? We are dealing with Litha. It is Litha season. Welcome to summer solstice. Welcome to Midsummer. Yes, just like the movie. Okay, so what are we talking about here at Litha season? And I guess I should get it briefly. Let me say, if for some reason you didn't take advantage of the last half hour, go grab something to drink, go grab something to smoke if you enjoy that, something to write with, a journal, art supplies if you're feeling creative and moved to want to express the concepts that we're working with, light a candle, light a stick of incense, make yourself cozy. I'm assuming that you already have. Let's begin. Okay, Litha season. OMG. OMG. Okay. Thanks for putting up with me, y'all. I really appreciate it. And massive thank yous to all of my Patreons who are supporting me right now, literally, and making it possible for me to do these videos for free. I really appreciate it. It's pretty exciting and freaks me out at the same time. So yay! You made me feel unsettled. Good job. Okay. Our themes for Litha season are this, in fact. There we go. Boom. Witch's work, power, transformation, healing, fertility, and embodiment. These are the big things that witches and Wiccans and pagans and heathens are working on at this time of year. Okay, so what are we talking about when we talk about this stuff? Well, power, right? Power is surging in the world right now in terms of our planet's cycle around the sun or the sun's energetic cycle throughout the year. We are reaching the pinnacle, the zenith, the peak, the apex of that solar energetic cycle. Everything is kind of downhill from here. So I like to think of Litha as like the top of the roller coaster, the top hill of the roller coaster. And we kind of are really just going for it from this point forward. We are stepping into our power as well, as watching these archetypes in the world step into their power. Transformation. We are witnessing the transformation of the natural world as it goes from just budding flowers on a lot of trees to now beginning to produce fruit. our plants and our veg are responding in that way. We're seeing baby animals grow into adolescent and adult animals in the agrarian world. But we're also seeing in one of our big archetypes that we work with throughout the year that are, for those of us who work with the triple goddess, in spring, they manifest as the maiden. They're very curious, they're very experimental, they're very playful, they're brash, they don't know any better, they're naive. And they are stepping into and transforming into the mother and the mothers. And we see holy days for mother goddesses all over the planet during this time of the year. So there's a profound transformation happening with our goddess energy that we might be working with. But there's also a transformation with our god energy that we might be working with, because at summer solstice, we see the oak king rise to the pinnacle of his power and be killed or sacrificed or otherwise removed of his power, or its or their power. And that power is transferred into the god form, the Holi king. And the Holi king is youthful and brash, and I wouldn't say he's necessarily experimental, or it is necessarily experimental, but it doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience either. They're the new kid on the block. They are the new version of this thing. And so they have a brashness about them. They have a naivety about them that definitely carries over from spring energy. And so we're seeing that profound transformation in the great archetypes that we are working with at this time of year. The other energies that we're working with: healing, fertility, and embodiment. Okay. The healing stuff comes from, or comes in a couple of different places. We want to work with the parts of ourselves that are transitioning from maiden energy or oak king energy into mother energy or Holi king energy. And we want to heal and create healing and self-care routines around that transition and around that transformation. And we want to welcome that transition in and transformation, but we also want to be aware of the parts of ourselves that we're killing off and the parts of ourselves that we are changing and having to move and shift and adjust and scooch that energy around. So we want to be taking care of ourselves during that process. We may also need to be doing some healing work with the land around us and the natural resources around us, as well as the natural cycles shift from spring energy into summer energy. If we're thinking about our garden metaphor and our tree metaphor that we've been working with all year, we started out in Ostara season with this bursting back into life. We've come back from the lands of the dead, which is the winter journey. And we're like here, and we're excited, and we're bright-eyed, and we bushy-tailed, and we don't know any better, and it's really exciting. And then we move into Beltane season, where that energy calms down a little bit, but we're still pretty randy. We're definitely still experimenting with things. And now we are moving into summer, where we need to commit. We need to mature a little bit. We need to engage our judgment a little bit. And the youthful, naive parts of us may feel a little something about that and may need some extra care and some extra healing, as well as the mothering or the nurturing parts of us. And, I say this in every class, but I'll say it again. When I say things like God or goddess or mother or father, I'm not speaking to any gendered beings. I'm speaking to the inherent energies that all living beings possess to protect, to nurture, to foster, to be fertile, to fertilize, to be in relationship with any and all of these energetic streams. These are our birthrights as humans and as living entities in this reality. So we all get to do all of this stuff. And we all kind of have to, if I may be so bold. We're supposed to be doing this stuff. We're supposed to be engaging in all of these energies and taking an active hand in creating this reality, as well as destroying the old ones. Okay. So, healing, fertility, and finally, I should also say about fertility. coming back to the solar energy that's happening right now. The sun, as I said, is at its zenith in its power, its apex, top of the roller coaster. And so there are three sacrificial mating moments that happen between the goddess and the god in a lot of witchcraft and pagan mythos and ritual. And if I may, my handy dandy graphic. I always like, where? I will figure this out someday, I swear to God. This black line here represents the goddess. She is constant, she is unwavering, she's eternal. This sea monster creature, being, line thing up here, this represents the energy of the god or the sun. Earth, sun. And we see that it rises and falls, right? It starts out really low, it comes up to a pinnacle, a zenith, and then it comes back low again. This is the rise and fall of the Holi King and the Oak King. We start at winter solstice with the Oak King, and the Oak King just gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger until we hit the zenith here at summer solstice. And then the Holi King and the Oak King trade places. The Holi King kills the Oak King. The Oak King is sacrificed. This plays out a couple different ways in different pagan myths. And the Holi King takes over. And the Holi King takes over at the peak of their power, and they wane. They only wane from here on out. It just gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So there is, oh, and I should point out, our little legs here, this is Beltane, this one here. This is Litha. And this is Lunisad or Lammas. These are considered sacrificial or these are considered ritualistic sacrifices is what I should say. Meaning the sacrifice is done symbolically. Here at summer solstice, the king is actually killed. Or emasculated, or the sword is officially taken away and given to someone else. Something along those lines. It's something very, very real, very physical world where this power has exchanged hands. You don't have it anymore. This person over here, this entity, archetype, they have the power now. Okay. So, and last but not least, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure that I'm going to be able to find a few things in the real world to relate these things to. Embodiment. During our spring energy, we are in a trial. We are in the laboratory. We are experimenting. We're trying things on. We're taking them off. We're rolling around in the dirt. We're just playing at some of these ideas. But when we step into summer, we are called to embody the changes that we are making or the decisions that we are committing to. We are called to actually embody them, actually be the living thing of it, the living symbol of the thing. And so that's a big part of the push of the energy within Litha season as we step into summer, is really kind of stepping into this thing that we've been conceptualizing for a while. It's like, okay, we've thought about it enough, we've played with it enough, we need to do it now. Okay. Alternative names for this holiday. Summer solstice, midsummer, Albenheffen, Kupalanach, Gathering Day, and Night of the Chalice. Okay, let's talk about these for a second. Summer solstice is the astronomical name of this particular holiday. And what we are saying when we say this, if you are not familiar, is solstice, or sol meaning sun. Stice is still or stillness or standing still. And there is a ton of information about this online. Probably going to do a way better job than me rapidly trying to explain this to you. But ultimately what happens in the Northern Hemisphere at the solstice, winter solstice and summer solstice, is the sun rises and sets at the same place on the eastern and western horizon 3 days in a row. And then from summer solstice to winter solstice, it will progressively move more and more south on the eastern horizon, rising every day, but further and further south on the eastern horizon until it gets to winter solstice, where it rises in the same place 3 times. And then over on the western horizon, same thing is happening. It's setting in the west, but very far north. Where are my directions? There we go. Very far north. And then as the year progresses towards winter solstice, this is for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, the sun will progressively go further and further south until it hits its most southern point. And then at winter solstice, it will rise on the eastern horizon, set on the western horizon, 3 days in a row. 3 days in a row. 3 days. That's a thing in religion, isn't it? I say that every time. Okay, moving on. But seriously. A little originality would be so cool. Okay. Or don't be original. Keep using the same symbols, and then it's easier to read it when we see it in your new religion. All right. So that's what we're saying in that name of summer solstice, is we're talking about the place where the sun is standing still for 3 days in a row at summer. That's what's up. If you go out and you watch, you will see right now, because the actual solstice is tomorrow, but it's really kind of a 72-ish hour period of the sun optically doing this on the eastern and western horizon. If you get it and mark it, if you have a way of marking exactly where on the horizon the planet or the sun is coming up and going down, you will actually be able to see this with your eye. And if you just pay attention for the rest of the year, look at where the sun is rising. Look at where the sun is setting. Notice how the light falls in your room and changes over the course of the year. That's that phenomenon. That is exactly what the ancients were doing with all of their amazing henges and medicine wheels and stone cairns and all of that great stuff. They were marking things like the rising and setting points of the sun at different points of the year. It's ancient calendars. It was the way that people were telling time. Okay, Midsummer. If this is the start of summer, why is it called Midsummer? Because smarty pants. Summer, the closer you get to the equator, summer starts earlier and earlier. And as we know from working the earlier portions of the wheel, summer can start as early as Ostara, or spring equinox, for some people, in terms of weather and in terms of the response from the natural world, whether that's animals breeding or plants getting up and doing their thing and growing and exploring the world. And so Midsummer is a classic name for this holiday, as this is the heart of the summer season for places that are very much in the warm band around the middle of the planet. This literally marks the middle of that season, not the start of it. It's already started for those guys. The name Alban-Heffen. This is a Druid name. And what we are saying in this, it's interesting. I found a couple of different sources. One source insists that when we are saying Alban-Heffen, we are saying apple harvest. And another source I found insists that we are saying the light of the shore. Either one of these makes sense to me, except that apples aren't really being harvested right now. They are just starting to grow on the trees. If you have an apple tree near you, you've probably been delighted at the beautiful pink, lovely smelling blossoms that it's had for the last 2.5 or 3 months. If you go out, you'll notice most of those blossoms are gone and they have been replaced with tiny little baby apples, because that's the season now. That's where we're at. We've left our maiden energy and we're now into mother energy. We can see the bump. So, the apple harvest, but the light of the shore makes a lot of sense to me. For Druids, the sky, the ocean, and the sun were profoundly important elements in their religion, their spiritual practices, and their conceptualization of reality. The sky, the sun, and the ocean were monumental in their understanding of how the fundamental building blocks of reality fit together. And at summer solstice, in the west, from the Western Isles of Europe, you would see the sun and the sky and the ocean all come together in this point. You can see it potentially every night at sunset. But there was something particular about this day the very longest day of solar power, and yet that sun sinking down into the ocean and out of the sky. So it was profoundly important for Druids then, and I expect for modern Druids still, to go and witness that, to be able to go to a shore and witness the sun on summer solstice sinking into the ocean, or if not that, a body of water of some type. A lake, if it was big enough, potentially. Another name for this is Kupalanak. Kupalanak, Kupala night. I'll talk about this a little bit more in just a second, but this is a really popular Slavic holiday that happens celebrating the marriage of two great gods and goddesses from the Slavic pagan tradition, and it is becoming a little bit more popular with folks. It's got some really cool traditions, so we'll talk about that more in just a second. Another name for this is Gathering Day, because as I was saying before, the sun is at its pinnacle of power. And if you work with herbs or plants, this is the most potent time to go and gather herbs for your magical practices. Anything that can be gathered now and used throughout the rest of the year should be. And of course, I'm going to take a moment and say, relax. I am not sending you out into the world knives a-flailing to go harvest everything within your reach. Calm down. Be very respectful and very mindful if you go and harvest herbs at this time of year. Be very respectful and very mindful of your environment, of how this plant got here in the first place. Is it native or is it invasive? What traditions does it come from? What other people might be working with this plant? All of that good stuff. Educate yourself. Stay grounded in being very humble when you're working with these entities. But if you are a Western witch and you've got your lavender growing in your garden, now is a great time to go sacrifice that and harvest it, or begin that process. So being mindful, being respectful, being caring about the people that have come before us and the land that we're on and all of that crazy stuff. This is a fantastic time to go and gather herbs for your work for the rest of the year. So Gathering Day is another very traditional name for this holiday. And Chalice of the Night. Okay, I think this is a really cool name. This is a modern Wicca name, and it really speaks to some of the Welsh and Irish names for this holiday, like the Day of Ceridwen and her cauldron, the Day of Ain Nachcain, the Day of Ceridwen, that's Welsh, Ain Nachcain, that's Irish. And what they're speaking to is the womb of the goddess. They're speaking to the great chalice that within which all humanity has been born and is pushed out of in a big sploosh of water and pain and curse words. So the Night of the Chalice is really underscoring the emphasis here of goddess energy. Even though the sun is at the pinnacle of its power, even though we have all of this fire symbolism because we're stepping into summer and it's hot and it's solar, right there in the center of all of that stuff, goddess worship, womb worship. And I don't mean womb, again, sure, uteruses are cool, but also plenty of people without uteruses have total capability of mothering and manufacturing and producing here in the physical world all kinds of stuff. So again, this is speaking to that energy that all humans have to hold a thing within themselves and ultimately produce cool stuff here on the physical plane, have a result. Okay, a few other names for this. Green Man Day, the Night of the Great Mother, and Green Week. That's another Slavic name for this. Okay. So, briefly, the goddess arc. The goddess shows her death in life aspect. She is overseeing the ritual sacrifice and replacement of the Oak King by the Holi King, and she steps fully into her mother goddess form. And that may seem a little strange to say that she is standing in her death in life aspect, but a little reminder, at winter solstice, she is standing in her life in death aspect. At winter solstice, she is reminding you, even here in the heart of death, I am still alive. This energy is eternal. The wheel turns. We will come back to the bright side of the wheel. The sun will return, all of that good stuff. Well, here she's doing exactly the same thing, but the opposite thing. Here in the heart of all of this power, in the heart of all of this of production and embodiment and boldness and vitality, here in the heart of all of that, she's coming in and killing the Oak King and replacing him with the Holi King, and reminding everybody the wheel turns and we will head back into the dark. Eat, drink, and be merry. Here in the heart of vitality, there's so many phrases that come to mind, even in Arcadia, right? It's this idea that even here in the heart of brilliance, there is still change. There is still destruction. There is still ending. The wheel will turn and we will head into the dark half of the year at some point. But for now, let's do this. Be bold. Take it while you've got it. That's another big part of why the goddess is presenting herself as her death in life aspect right now, is to remind you, this is not going to last. You had better enjoy this. You had better use it, and you had better utilize it, because it is not going to last. You too will die at some point. You will become weak. You will become feeble. So sorry, but it's true. And the goddess is here reminding you that in all of her splendor and all of their glory and all of their magical power and fecundity, they're like, but your ass is going to rot someday, girl. So, we stand. Okay. All right. The Holi King is reborn, known as the Dark Twin. The Holi King ushers in the waning half of the year. The Holi King kills the Oak King and takes his place. Tradition is replaced by raw power and initiative. Two better and worse ends. And this is the last Sabbath to overtly emphasize fertility until next spring, because the thrust, yang, extrovert, solar energy only wanes from here until Yule or winter solstice. All right, so let's see. In the global context, do I have a... Oh, okay. In the global context, the types of holidays that we see both within the pagan world, ancient and modern, as well as in belief systems and traditions and philosophies all around the planet at this time of year, have a major emphasis on partnership, abundance, water, fire, and vitality, light, and warmth. So those are the really big themes that we see reiterated over and over and over again at this time of year. We do see a couple of other themes. In particular, death is still here. We see that with the death of the Oak King by the Holi King. We see that in the goddess being in her death in life aspect. And we'll talk about a couple of the other holidays. But for the most part, it's partnership, abundance, water, fire, and then vitality. So... other holidays that we're seeing at this time of year. If you have the book, you have a calendar in the back that covers 7 weeks. Yes, 7 weeks this year. We are already a bit into it. The solstice and the equini are short seasons for me, and they are the quarter days. And the cross-quarter holidays, Imbolc, Beltane, Lunasad, and Samhain, are all longer, big seasons for me. I think of them as almost 8 weeks and kind of 6 to 7 weeks, and then 8 weeks, or even closer to 9 weeks sometimes. And so they kind of shrink and expand. They're not perfect pie wedges for me. And so during this season, we are looking around the globe and throughout time, and we are seeing cultures from all over the Northern Hemisphere participating in rituals and festivals celebrating partnership, life, abundance, vitality, light, warmth. We see some death rituals. We also see a pretty heavy emphasis on rituals that don't just incorporate water, but also incorporate something about shipping or fishing or travel by sea, something along those lines. Some of the really important stuff that we're seeing right now, of course, I can't go forward without mentioning that today is Juneteenth, which is a wildly important African-American Black holiday. that celebrates the emancipation of enslaved peoples in our country. Texas, particularly, had received word finally that those folks were freed from their enslavement. And so it is a day of joy. It is a day of recuperation. It is a day of rest. But in my mind, I really very much see it as a day of celebrating life, celebrating power, celebrating abundance, celebrating vitality. But I don't want to project my practices onto that tradition. So those folks have they describe their holiday the way that they describe it. I'm speaking from the outside of that experience. Other holidays that we are seeing right now within the 3 to 4 days that we would think of as traditionally being summer solstice. All Couples Day, which is a global thing, and we see coupling holidays throughout time and all around the planet happening right now. The marriage of Yarilo and Lada, which is Kupala night or Kupala Nak. Savitri Brata, which is a Hindu holiday. The marriage of Orpheus and Eurydice, which is a Greek holiday. Obviously, these are just three of many coupling holidays that are happening at this time of year. The Feast of the Great Spirit, or the Great Mystery, celebrating Orenda for the Iroquois, Wakantanka for the Lakota, and Ewana Willona for the Zuni. This is coupled with the Lakota Sundance ceremonies that happen at this time of year as well. And as I'm mentioning that, in Wyoming, there is the Bighorn medicine wheel, and it not only marks summer solstice, but it marks the rising days, the heliacal rising days of several fixed stars that show up right before and right after summer solstice. The markings on the wheel actually fit the time period from around 1200 CE to about 1700 CE. And if we think of when whites were overrunning Turtle Island, potentially those cultures didn't have the opportunity to change or adjust the wheel from that point forward. But it's a beautiful 2 to 3 month ritual would have taken place up there. And that was used as a calendar by those tribes to know when the sun dances and these other fertility and abundance holidays would have been celebrated, like the Iroquois green bean ceremony and the Iroquois green corn ceremony that comes a little bit later. We also see Ishtar's Day at this time of year. We have, what else do we have this year? Okay. And then other holidays that are happening within this season. We have Vestalia. This is the Roman festival dedicated to the hearth goddess Vesta. And it took place all month long. Similar ceremonies to the winter solstice here at the summer solstice. And so what you would do is you would put out the hearth fire and relight it brand new. And one of the ways that you can kind of acknowledge that here in the modern era is if you have a gas stove and you're brave enough, you could actually put out the pilot light and restart it. But if you don't want to screw with that, and that's reasonable, you can also cook on a different burner from what you normally cook on. And it might sound a little odd, but it's sort of warming up and moving the energy around on your stove. That's a great way to do this, and a great symbol for that in the modern era. We see the New Year's, a type of New Year's for Yoruba folk, and the Feast of Elegua. But we also see the Feast of Babalu Aya and Osanyin from the Yoruba people as well. And Elegua is a father type of deity. He's a protector. They are a protector. And they are connected very closely to the dead. They protect travelers, and they are an embodiment of electricity. And the protecting travelers and electricity stuff really speaks to me a lot of the lightning on the masts of ships, that's connected to Gemini symbolism. So it really kind of like I went there with that a little bit. I thought that was pretty cool. Other holidays that we're seeing at this time of year: the Feast of Expectant Mothers, Rusalka's Week, and Jaya Parvati Puja, happening in India. Some other stuff that we're seeing happen from June 16th to June 18th, so we just passed it, was Skitorphoria, which is a 3-day festival from ancient Greece overseeing the blessing and fertility of the fields of grain coming to harvest soon. What's really wild, yes, yeah, crossroad deity, absolutely, yes, Patty, you are correct. What's really wild to me is it's June 19th, and we are just beginning to see the first portions of harvest festivals beginning to happen. It's already starting. The idea of receiving the abundance from the planet is already here for some people, especially the folks that are really close to the equator, or the closer you get to the equator. And so Skitorphoria was a ancient Greek 3-day festival overseeing the blessing and like zhuzhing up of the fertility of the fields of grain, and it is still celebrated today. There was a whole bunch of stuff that involved Athena, and we see a whole bunch of holidays dedicated to Athena and her various priestesses and temples and her dog, and a bunch of stuff going on at this time of year that's all Athena, Athena, Athena. But the modern day equivalent is still celebrated now in Turkey, and it's called Gala Bayrama. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. Sorry, Turkish people who may be watching. The holiday is spelled Galla, second word, Bayramy. And you can look that holiday up. And word on the street is some of those rituals that they use, some of the blessings, some of the forms of ritual that they use harken back quite a day. So something really interesting about that. Another really important holiday that we see at this time of year is the Feast of St. John the Baptist. Yes, you're going to learn a little Christianity in your witchcraft class. So sorry. Here's a wet nap. Okay. So I bring this up every year, and it's really important to me because the Catholic Church recognized the relationship of the Holly King and the Oak King when they placed the holy day of St. John the Baptist on June 24th, aligning it with summer solstice. If you don't know the whole relationship between John the Baptist and Jesus, that's fine. The crib notes are, John came from a culture of people that really got into the idea of blessing people in water. And that was a gig that he kind of took out to the world. He was like, hey, have you tried this whole holy water blessing thing? Let's do it. Get in the lake. Let's go. Let me dunk you. And St. John the Baptist, was the person to baptize Jesus that sort of brought him into his holiness. Or was like, hey, you ever thought about being holy? Let's do this. So, which is an interesting thing because we always think of Jesus as being the most potent or powerful element there, but John is sort of the character that woke that up, or forced him to consciously acknowledge it, or forced everybody else to consciously acknowledge it. So there was some sort of a catalyst between the two. John being the mortal person there, and Jesus being the immortal or the deity person there. And, you know, they got up to all sorts of stuff. They were at the strip club. They were going crazy. Okay, JK. But John, the Catholic Church ultimately put John's holy day at summer solstice. And what's Jesus's holy day? December 24th. So they literally are opposing each other. They literally reign on the two halves of the year. And we already know that there is just a boatload of winter solstice and Yule and pagan imagery embedded within the Christmas Christ Mass tradition. So we don't need to go into that now. Come back in 6 months and I'll tell you about it. But I think it's very, very important to emphasize the fact that the Feast of St. John, the character that was the mortal half or the mortal answer or echo of Jesus, the immortal character, is here on June 24th. Side note, John's holy colors are red and green. Where else do we see that? Pretty traditional colors for Christmas. So I think that that's a very interesting correlation, and also a little bit of a tell. It's like, like, so you guys did know about this. Oh, okay. Cool. Let's see. One other day that always really catches my attention at this time of year is another Hindu holiday named Yatha Ratra. And this amazing festival from India features massive chariots pulled through the streets. Jagannath is celebrated, a particular symmetrical form of Vishnu. So Jagannath is a Hindu deity, but Jagannath is actually a form of Vishnu, who is a sky god, along with his brother and sister. So mark these symbols that we're talking about here. We have a chariot, okay? We have a single deity with a brother, sister on either side. And there's something about symmetry here. There's something about balance, things being identical on one side to the other. Okay. And then the last holiday that I want to talk about a little bit at this time of year is Cupola Night, the marriage of Yarilo and Lada. These are two young, bright, cute deities from the Slavic tradition. We see Cupola Night recognized and celebrated in a bunch of different forms, but there's a lot of similarities between places like Russia and Belarus and the Ukraine and Latvia. Both of these deities, Yarilo, which is the god, and Lada, the goddess, kind of come into their power at spring. They sort of wake up and some of them literally have birthdays during spring. And then here at summer solstice, they get married. It is the sacred knocking of boots. And this is where they step into their maturity, right? They're not kids anymore. They're not playing around. We're stepping into adulthood. We are initiating each other into that process, all of that good stuff. Yarilo is a vegetation god. Pretty straightforward there, right? Coming into power at spring, coming into the height of its power here at summer. Lada is a solar goddess. She is depicted sometimes as the sun, and sometimes just as a very sunny, bright, beautiful young woman. Her name means beauty, but it also means order. And I think that that's a very interesting thing, that there's some correlative there in the language about beauty and grace and order all being kind of the same thing, or maybe things in their right place, or things coming in the correct order. Maybe I'm projecting that onto that, but there might be an interesting rabbit hole linguistically to go down with her name. So she oversaw fertility, she oversees abundance, right? We're echoing these themes over and over again. But this goddess is also known as Morana, who is a Slavic goddess of death. So here again, we have this emphasis of the goddess as death in life. I am here, I'm fertile, I am fecund, but I am also the blade of the knife. I am also the severing of this resource. Okay. So, cupola night, the word cupola can mean bathing, and in some places the name is combined with the name Ivan, which is the name John, and so we see the echoing here of Catholic tradition of this night being sort of dedicated to St. John and to bathing and all of this stuff, but we know it's a little bit older than that, so thanks for playing. The traditional forms of celebration on this night would have been all-night bonfires, just like all the other pagans around the world. I don't know if I said that on camera when I actually decided to start filming and showing you the filming. But bonfire is kind of a big deal. Pagans love to set stuff on fire. Side note, in case you didn't know. So bonfires, very big deal. Tarred wheels, and we'll talk about the solar wheels here in a little bit. Weaving wreaths of wildflowers and setting them to float on rivers and lakes, very, very popular. And of course, gathering herbs. All of these are traditional forms of celebration for these holidays, past and present. Cupola Night is absolutely a modern and ancient holiday, and people celebrate this right now. Let's see, what else? Water fights, that's a thing. There can be some pranking on the night before, and and depending on the village or the region, that can be very harmless pranking, or that can be fucking shit up, as the kids say. And in the morning, on the morning of the celebration, or the mornings, if it's a multi-day celebration, depending on the region, that is the time that witches are encouraged to go out and collect dew, collect the morning dew. So the dew that is on the plants the mornings of the solstice days. Very magical, very potent stuff. But again, that water symbolism, right? So we're using that stuff for fertility. We're using that stuff for purification, jumping over bonfires for purity and for protection, for ritual cleansing. Like I said, floating wreaths on the river. And in some places, past and present, we saw this as another ritual mating ceremony or celebration. And so in some of those places where the flower wreaths are being sent down the river, further down the river, young men would try to catch the wreaths and bring them back to the girl that had sent them out as a like, hey, you want to, okay. But this is my favorite version of that, or portion of that fertility ritual stuff is amongst the peoples that practice these ceremonies and these celebrations, there is the myth or the tradition of finding the fern blossom. Fern blossoms are thought to bloom one night a year, which is the night of summer solstice, or St. John's night. And it was to find a flower, the person was guaranteed prosperity, luck, discernment, power, fertility, abundance, all of that good stuff. And the young women would head into the forest first, and then the young men would follow behind them. And side note, ferns don't have flowers. So, we don't know what folks were finding in the bushes, but hopefully they were enjoying it and everybody was having a consensually sexy and delicious good time. What happens in the forest stays in the forest, right? Okay. And of course I would be remiss without mentioning that the entirety of June is Pride Month. Hey, let me hear you say pride. Come on, people, now, pride. Okay. And there is certainly some coupling happening during this time of year. And as we push into the symbolism, which I'm going to scooch through really, really fast because it's already 6:20, I think I'm probably going to go over a little bit because I screwed up that first half hour. Sorry, everybody who has a life. We are going to talk about the same and opposite symbolism that we see in our astrology going through this portion of the year, and how pride symbolism is really woven into that. And considering that pride is, in theory, a very modern holiday, it's really cool to see this ancient symbolism echoed in this tradition. Okay. What else? Quickly. As we move through July, okay, we have lots of Mother Days. The July 2nd through 9th is dedicated to Kuan Yin, the mother who eases ultimate suffering, the mother of the world. July 6th is the Dalai Lama's birthday. Let's see what else. July 17th is Isis's birthday, and July 14th through August 1st is the Osiris, Isis, Horus, Nile flooding cycle, where Isis is born. All the Egyptian deities are kind of like born and start to do stuff within hours of it. They're like born on one day, they get married the next day. They get their live stream up the day after that. It's pretty intense. They screw with time over there. And this cycle, that is the last 2 to 3 weeks of July, brings in the very end of the ancient or Sothic Egyptian calendar and the start of the new calendar, the new energy cycle for them. And it kicks off the Nile flooding its banks and flooding the delta. That would have been quite fertile ground. And so, of course, we have fantastic water imagery there. We have fantastic imagery of a mother's water breaking there, and this fertility sort of splashing out across the earth. But another point that we get at this time of year that I think is important is on July 4th, we experience three different interesting things. Okay, so here in America, July 4th, of course, is the 4th of July. There's a 4th of July everywhere, but it is our Independence Day. It's the day that we celebrate our independence from the monarchy of England. Also on this day, for Rome, this was the day of peace, which I think is interesting. And we don't have time to get into that, but there's that. But also on July 4th, Earth hits its aphelion. That's Aphelion, aphelion. And what that word means is, in our orbit, the planet's orbit around the sun, we are not in a perfect circle like this around the sun. It's a little bit more of an oval shape. And so there are portions, and the sun is not dead center of that oval. It's slightly off towards one point. It's a little closer to one point than it is to the other point of the oval. So our orbit around the sun, not a perfect circle, sun slightly off center, and the orbit is a little bit more like an oval than it is a circle. The aphelion is the point in our orbit around the sun where we are the furthest from the sun. And boy howdy, is that not an apt motherfucking metaphor? Here on July 4th, we are the furthest from the light. The opposite side of this is the perihelion, and that is where we are the closest to the light, and we actually find that just right after winter solstice, which I think is also a very beautiful metaphor, that when we are in the dark and in the cold, we are actually the closest to the light. But here, when we are standing in our brilliance and our power, we are actually the furthest from the source. Take from that metaphor what you will. And last but not least, I guess I should have said this earlier, but from July 14th to July 25th, we have Altingi. I love that it's called that. And this is the Old Norse Midsummer. It is dedicated to Forseti and Tyr and deities of justice. And we get that justice echoing thing happening a lot around this time as well. For Taoists, summer solstice kicks off a holiday multi-day festival called Shang Ti, which celebrates fire, yang, the emperor, virtuous inner power, as well as justice and law, and the South. It kind of recognizes all of that stuff. And in the midst of all of that, here in the secular world, on June 21st, we have Father's Day. What a bizarre coincidence. I wonder how they came up with that. Whack. Okay, moving on. Bum, bum, ba, 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 ba. Oh my god, the graphics. I love it. Okay, here we go. Sky Guide. Okay. If you have the book, all of these dates are in your calendar, but this, I think, makes it a little bit easier to see and track throughout the season. So on June 16th, we had the heliacal rise of the Pleiades. Of course, the heliacal rise versus tropical astrology, it's about 23 days different. So if you look, the Pleiades is in the sign of Taurus. You're like, okay, but it's not Taurus. It's practically Cancer season at this point. That's what that is. Also at this time of year, we've got, okay, well, this is not going to happen every year, but it is happening this year, and I've been trying to include this for you guys. June 18th, we had Mercury go retrograde at 14 degrees Cancer, and it is going to retrograde all the way back to 5 degrees of Cancer, where it will go direct on July 12th. If you practice astrology, if you have a copy of your chart, you might look at, do I have any planets or do I have any angles between 14 degrees and 5 degrees of Cancer? I'm going to feel this in my life. This season is going to be extra potent for me. The messages are going to be coming through very strongly. June 20th, the sun moves into Cancer. We also have a solar eclipse that day. We will not see it here on our side of the planet. It's going to be a show for everybody from China through India, all the way into the middle of Africa, I think, is the path. It's pretty epic. Billions of people are going to get to see it, but we don't. That's all right. We've had plenty of solstice or sun solar eclipse energy in our country over the last few years. We could probably sit this one out. I think it's going to be okay. We also see the first new moon of summer at 0 degrees Cancer later that day. We will get 2 new moons in Cancer this year. That does not happen every year. So if anything, there is something about this turn of the wheel. There is something about this portion of the cycle where we have, one, Mercury retrograde saying we need to go back, we need to undo some stuff, we need to renegotiate some things, we need to reinterpret and re-listen to the messages, please and thank you. And then these 2 new moons in Cancer saying we need to double down on doing the work of self-care, caring for our family, nurturing, bringing that home and family energy to whatever it is that we are starting or initiating or getting ourselves involved in. And genuinely, I couldn't think of a better attitude to have in terms of the political experiences that we are all facing right now, the climate experiences, the economic experiences, to begin to think of ourselves as a family, to begin to treat strangers as you would family members and extend to them the same trust, the same courtesy, sharing your resources. This to me is this is how we're going to get through this stuff. This is kind of the only way that we're going to get through it. So we have 2 times in this next month of time, next 30-ish days of time, to press into this conversation with ourselves and to really listen and see what it is that the cycles are trying to give us and show us and teach us right now. Other stuff that we're seeing at this time of year. June 26th, we'll see the heliacal rising of Aldebaran. July 4th, Earth at Aphelion, as I said. July 5th is our first full moon of summer. And the first full moon of summer, the first full moon after summer solstice is always called the honeymoon. That's often a name for the June full moon as well, but this is the one that's after summer solstice. It's not coming until July. It's going to be at 13 degrees of Capricorn. So if you have any planets or any aspects at 13 degrees of Capricorn, that's going to be a potent moment for you, or any of the other cardinal signs. So 13 degrees of Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn. You're going to maybe feel a little spicy. We have the heliacal rise of Capella, Mercury going direct, the heliacal rise of Polaris, that is the North Star, and, well, that doesn't make sense. No, never mind. And then our black second new moon at 28 degrees Cancer. And then finally, the sun moves into Leo. So, some other stuff that's happening astronomically at this time of year. We are going to see the Delta Aquarid meteor showers. The Perseid meteor showers happen at this time of year. And then, of course, we've got our solar and lunar eclipses. So, like I said, tomorrow, solar eclipse. The July 5th is a lunar eclipse, and we just had the other lunar eclipse on the Sagittarius full moon in the middle of June. Or, excuse me, the beginning of June, June 5th. So that was Sag, and then Cancer, and then Capricorn. So these portions of your life, wherever Sagittarius, Cancer, and Capricorn are getting lots of buzz, lots of attention, lots of emphasis. And when we look at that, well, I'll get into that in just a second. Let's talk about astronomy, then we'll talk about astrology. Okay, the two constellations that I really want us to focus on at this time of year are Gemini and Cancer. Now, I know that we are literally in the last hours of Gemini, according to tropical astrology or Western astrology. However, according to the actual sky, astronomy, sidereal astrology, Vedic astrology, we are only 6 days into Gemini. We have all of Gemini yet to go, pretty much, and then we will move into Cancer season. This is part of why I emphasize Gemini symbolism and archetypal imagery so much during this times, because and this is just a small part of it, but more will be revealed. Because astronomically, the sun is still in the constellation of Gemini, so we're still getting that energy. Okay, so let's talk about the constellation of Gemini just a little bit. This Gemini is also, or this constellation is called Gemini. It's also referred to as the twins. It is also referred to as Polydeuces or Polydeucus, which means many sweet, two sweets. These are the sons of Litha, which I think is an interestingly similar name to Lara, who we are talking about in our Slavic holiday. And the twins are, in Greek myth, Castor and Pollux. They are both horsemen, or horse people. Castor is the mortal version, and Pollux is the immortal version. And we just talked about a pair of brother-type figures who are mortal and immortal, here to get some work done. They are sometimes depicted as two boys, sometimes pictured as two genderless people, sometimes it is two beings made of stars. They are often depicted on horseback as two people on a horse or two people riding two separate horses. And side note, consider the image of a person on horseback as something associated with Gemini, and then going directly across the chart to Sagittarius, and the centaur, a human horse, being one of the main images of Sagittarius. Enjoy the rabbit hole. Okay. There is some really cool stuff that we will get to in just a minute with Castor and Pollux and the Gemini symbolism, but I just wanted to kind of point that out. There's this many sweetness, there's this two beings, two boys, two people on horseback. They often are depicted with gigantic hats, gigantic broad-brimmed hats. And there is a fantastic tarot deck by Barbara Walker where she depicts the Magician card with one of these giant wide-brimmed hats, and the hat actually makes the infinity symbol with its swoops. It's really cool. It's really well done. Okay. And then the other constellation that we're working with at this time of year is Cancer. This is the crab, the scarab. This has also been called the crayfish or the lobster. Sartan is another name. And we've also seen this constellation referred to as two asses or two donkeys. So there's the something two-ness there, okay? But we've also seen this constellation referred to as the stall or the manger or the yoke or the enclosure. The constellation of Cancer was named the Gate of Man by Chaldeans. And Chaldean astrology and astronomy is some of the oldest stuff that we have on record. It certainly isn't the place where humans started to pay attention and write things down. It's just some of the oldest stuff that we have documented. And some of their names for things and their depictions of things have lasted all the way through to today when we look at names used in astronomy and imagery and things like that. But this is the Gate of Man. And I'm going to get into that more. Am I? I'll do it right now. Okay. So the Gate of Man was imagined by Chaldeans and then later on Assyrians, Sumerians, Babylonians, and then people that descended from them, and inherited ideas from them, as the gate of man. This was thought as the place in the sky where souls descended from the heavens to come into the body and then come and be here and be alive and have a life and do stuff. It starts there. If we think of the symbolism of Cancer, in terms of the actual idea of a crab, we have this shell, right, with a real squishy interior. And so there's something very protective around something very soft and vulnerable. So keep that imagery for me. This idea of this being the gate of man, this is the source that souls are coming from out in the heavens from the gods and descending down here into the physical plane. Okay. Let's move on to the astrology because I can't stop talking about it. I can't stop referring to the astrology. Okay. All right. I'm going to read to you for a moment and then we'll talk. Continue throwing comments and questions into the chat, please. Okay. Here we are at Litha season, and the sun is leaving Gemini. As the sun approaches its zenith in the sky, we are back in touch with our bodies, and we want to go outside again, especially now. It's time to meet everyone and think all the thoughts and generally try to do everything. Our focus moves from stimulating the body to stimulating the mind. This is Gemini season. New moon in Gemini, which we already had, we indulge in spontaneous conversations, trips, hookups, and investigative rabbit holes, mostly without any kind of agenda, just knowing stuff to know it, just wanting to learn things to learn it. And I would say that over this last Gemini season, we have been flooded with new information about a wide variety of things. And then we had the full moon in Sagittarius. We consider the sources of knowledge, and we consider who we might mix with that inspires trust and camaraderie, like they are actually a part of our fraternity, the people who just get us. So that is the work that we have been doing as we moved through Gemini season. And again, I understand that for some people, things are very cut and dried, and when this sign stops and this sign starts, that's it. We're done with that work and we're doing this work. And so, cool, go with that paradigm if that makes sense for you. This is one of the places in the wheel where things get really murky and mixed up for me and are all kind of blended together. There's a little of the before, there's a little of the now, and there's a little of the yet to come, all kind of happening at the same time for me at this portion in the wheel. But that's my gig. And if it makes more sense to you, especially on an intuitive level, to keep things separate, keep them separate. Listen to your intuition on that. But then we move into Cancer. So as of tomorrow, we are actually stepping into Cancer season as far as Western or tropical astrology is concerned. We step into Litha and Cancer season. And as we do so, we want to make a family with all of these new people that we have met. We want to make a home and we want to make a nest. So we went out there, we got back into our bodies, we mixed it up with some people, we exchanged some ideas, and now we've kind of gotten a sense of like who's out there and doing stuff and who are the people that are moving the same way that I'm moving and thinking the same way that I'm thinking. I kind of want to, I mixed it up with a lot of people who aren't, who are very different from me. And now I kind of want to try to find my tribe a little bit. I want to try to find my crew, my group, my posse, my homies, my collective, my coven, my whatever, like my collective, my fraternity. I want to try to find some of those people and get on the same page with those cats. New moon in Cancer. This is tomorrow, but then again, like I said, we're going to have a second new moon in Cancer in July. We examine our relationships, especially those where a lot of nurturing is involved. We connect more with people, ideas, and genders that share a sameness with us. And that is a very broad concept. That's a very subjective concept. So what I would encourage is that you just kind of go with what makes sense for you there, what feels right there, what feels like sameness to you. And then kind of push into that. And then on the full moon in Capricorn, we will acknowledge and honor our blood ancestors, living and dead, as well as adopted families and mentors who have been deeply involved in our lives. So in the full moon in Capricorn, we really are kind of touching in with the heritages and the traditions, genetically and culturally, that have produced us, that we are the offspring of. That's what we really kind of want to get back to on that moon. Okay, so we play multiple choice in the weeks leading up to Litha. Everyone is cross-pollinating and checking out our options and exchanging energy between ourselves and different people, places, ideas, and states of being. We rub up against new and divergent stuff, and it gets on us, and we see what that's like. And maybe we have a little fallout from those adventures. It's pollinating and getting pollinated. As we move through the end of spring, we get some of the excess energy out of our systems. Maybe not so much this year. But when the sun hits that solstice point, the energy of Litha season wants us to commit to some stuff. And Cancer vibes want some emotional security after all of that sampling. So that's a lot of what's kind of happening for us right now. It's like we've been out there and we've tried out a whole bunch of different things, and now the Cancer vibes are like, I kind of want to just, like, I feel like the ground has been moving beneath my feet a little too much. I'd like to just be certain about a few things, if that's at all possible. Thanks. It's time to step into our summertime energetic stride. Time to grab the reins of the chariot and try running a few races. The wise and patient Oak King has been supplanted by the young and potent Holi King, who is eager to make a mark on the world before their time runs out. Our tender buds have been dusted, and it's time to start producing some fruits with all of this power flowing around us. Moving further into Litha, Cancer vibes encourage us to finally relax a little bit and slow down a little bit, to float on the warm summer night air, conduct our business under the stars and by the light of the moon. It is easy to forget the hardships and rigorous life choices under the face that we face at Yule, and for a while, maybe we should. Shifting into nurturing what we planted in spring is abundantly important now. Doting on and getting emotional about the tender shoots that could only survive in the bright half of the year is important, because we know the whole life cycle. Across the wheel sits the crone, silently watching from an icy hollow in a dead tree. But today, that tree is alive and budding with fruit that you will soon eat. Rejoice and witness the miracle of your heritage that is Mother Earth. Okay, so let's talk about this for just a second. We have been experimenting and now it's time to commit, right? It's very much like once you're pregnant, unless you have an abortion, which is always a fine thing to do, you're kind of committed to the pregnancy. This is not something that you're going to be able to change your mind about at some point and be like, you know what? Let me put this off for 6 months. Just take this baby, set it over there. I'll be right back. It's not, you're committed to the thing. You're doing the thing. So looking at, I don't always do this, but I wanted to do this for this particular holiday because there is so much happening astrologically right now for us as a species. Let me go through the filters of what it is that we're experiencing right now. We are in the Piscean era, and we are at the very end of the Piscean era. And what I mean by that is the precession of the equinoxes. Spring equinox is found, in Western astrology, it's found at the very end of Pisces, beginning of Aries. but in sidereal astrology, the spring equinox actually falls within just the first few degrees of Pisces, and it is about to move into Aquarius over the next couple hundred years. It will finally move unequivocally into Aquarius. Like the nodes of the moon, the precession of the equinoxes, it moves backwards through the signs. So it has been Aries, it was Pisces, or it is Pisces now, and it will be Aquarius soon. So first and foremost, we have to understand that we live in an era, in a mega era, right? A millennia long era, of sacrifice, of martyrdom. When we think of Pisces, and we think of a lot of the words that are associated with Pisces and the 12th house that it rules, it's a lot of the end, dissolution into the all, the loss of the self into the all. And specifically here in the mundane world, it deals with hospitals and morgues and asylums and prisons and places where people go to die or go to disappear or go to end. It can be, it can represent monastic life, where somebody has retreated from the world and has just completely dedicated themselves to God or whatever that is for them. And if I think about how it is on Earth right now, what it's like on Earth right now, and I think about how it is that humans respond to things here on Earth, something has to be martyred for us to have a response. Something has to be sacrificed for us to have a response. For us to be able to empathize on a large scale with someone, we have to witness them go through pain, trauma, death, even, before we finally are moved to that. And I'm really excited for that to end as a species, personally. I'm over the martyr archetype. I'm done with it. I'm good. When I was a young and brash witch, because I'm not now. One of my favorite sayings to piss people off was, it's very convenient that Jesus had his hands nailed down because now he doesn't have to help with the dishes. That has been an attitude that I have held for some time. And, not to beat up on that particular archetype, Jesus is an all right guy. He always buys the first round. He's very nice. But my point with that being, yes, to bear witness. Exactly. Both I have to witness the thing. That's ultimately where I'm going with this, is that somebody, either me or someone else, has to go through this horrible trial, and then we have to see it before we believe it. And we are going to kill ourselves as a species if we live like that much longer. We need to move into the at least part of the Aquarian mindset, which is, I'm special because we are all special, but I don't have to see you suffer to know that suffering exists. I don't have to witness your death. I don't have to witness your crucifixion to know that this is bad. And right now, that's where we're stuck as a species. We have to see awful things happen before we believe that they are real in the world. And then after much time and work, we are like, oh yes, this is real, and maybe I want to do something about it. And so I think at least a portion of moving into the Aquarian era is potentially going to be that we don't have to witness people suffering anymore to know that suffering is real and we should do something about it. Let's be nice to each other and make it good for each other. There's a bunch of other stuff about the Aquarian era, but anyways, I just kind of wanted to start with that most meta element, the deepest ringing bell of our lifetime right now is that thing. Kind of in the background of all of it is this sacrifice and this martyrdom. And then when we come back down into just our particular era, we're seeing this confluence of these tremendously heavy planets, Saturn and Pluto and Mars, meeting up in the sign of Capricorn for the first time in 1,500 years-ish, give or take. And the trauma and the unnecessary flex of power for the sake of power that we're witnessing with that, sort of reiterating this, like, you're gonna suffer. that we're going to make sure that it's blasted everywhere. We're going to make sure that the brand is suffer and suffering and martyrdom and victimhood. We're really, really, really going to push that. And you know, and we're witnessing it, right? We're seeing that all around us in the world. We're seeing sort of, you know, humanity being bent over. We're seeing humanity sort of, you know, being forced to take a knee, and be brought to its knees in this victim-like way. But then when we come even closer in, we are seeing Saturn about to step into Aquarius, and one of my favorite local astrologers, Amanda Moreno at Aquarian Spirals, you know, considers Saturn's entrance into Aquarius as the actual kind of preamble. Here we go. This is really sort of the beginning of the Aquarian era, which will last, you know, 2,000 plus years, and there is what we're seeing on our planet right now. What we're seeing worldwide is this, you know, great shrugging off, right? It's the species, humanity itself is saying like, no more, man. We are not playing by these rules anymore. We are not listening to these old forms of power anymore. We are not listening to these old forms of tradition anymore, because they do not serve us anymore, and in fact they're killing us. And it's on display for all to see and to be horrified by. So the big push behind this lunar cycle in particular this time around the wheel, while we've got all of this stuff going on, it's the Piscean era, and we have all of these major powers stepping in and being really awful because they can. We also have this independence. We also have this, I'm special because all humans are special, and all humans are special, and we all need to be recognized as being special and having something to offer to the group. We all have to come to the table right now with our gifts and do the thing. And so in this particular lunar cycle, with all of that stuff in the backdrop, what we are seeing hardcore emphasis on is the argument between personal freedoms and responsibility and restrictions, and this weird mix between freedom and obligation, and how sometimes freedom is going to come more to the fore and sometimes obligation is going to come more to the fore. The solar eclipse tomorrow is conjunct the fixed star Mechalinen, which I didn't include in any of your calendars. It's actually a very small fixed star, but it is in the left shoulder of the Charioteer, the constellation, the Charioteer. It's in the left shoulder. And it has an energy that's similar to Mercury and similar to Mars. So it wants to talk about stuff, it wants to broadcast, it wants to be victorious, it can be short-tempered, it can be short-sighted. So tomorrow for the summer solstice, if you're doing any kind of magic with that, what I would ask for is, well, I don't want to tell you how to do your magic, but the types of things that you could work on with the summer solstice tomorrow is taking advantage of the patriarchal light being blocked out for a moment and seeing what is revealed in the dark. And I don't necessarily think it will be happy things. I don't necessarily think that will be things that you're excited to go hang out with, but they are things that you must become aware of in this world. And then the patriarchal light will come back on and, hey, it's back to business as usual, la 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 la. But solar equinoxes are opportunities to do no ritual at all and just be still and be at peace and let the moment pass and then come into working. It is a new moon, and so we have lots of astrological magical symbolism saying it's right to be at peace, it's right to be still, it's right to just listen. But if you are doing any kind of magical work, you might ask for revelations, but into the darkness. Let me see into the dark. Let me see the things that are being hidden from me. And I think the last lunar eclipse and the following lunar eclipse are also great opportunities to ask to be shown things that are in hiding, to be shown things that you have been willfully ignorant of, to be shown things that you have purposefully ignored or that have been hidden from you. If you choose to do that kind of work, I highly recommend that you build yourself a very strong container to keep yourself sealed up and safe from that stuff. Don't invite it into your house, but do invite it into a place where you can examine it and look at it very closely. I think that's very, very important work that can be done right now. Saturn ultimately is the ruler of this full moon and the moon in Capricorn as well. Or the new moon, excuse me, tomorrow, and the full moon coming up. Saturn is kind of the ruling planet of that stuff. Saturn rules Capricorn, full moon in Capricorn, obviously, but just its placement in the sky right now, it just has a lot of emphasis. And so eclipses are always an opportunity to let your eyes adjust to the dark and see what has been hiding in the light, whether that's the lunar light or the solar light. But those can be really harsh, gnarly revelations. So create a good container for yourself, do your self-care routines, protect yourself, whatever it is that you need to do, bless and cleanse and banish before, during, and after, and all that good stuff. But if you feel like you have the capacity to hold that information, now is a fantastic time to find out what the fuck is going on and how can I be of better service. But that starts with losing your ignorance, losing your naivety, and stepping into maturity, which is exactly what we're doing here at Litha season. Okay, so some meditations for you to work with on these moons. For tomorrow's new moon, as well as the new moon on the 20th, I think, which is at 28 degrees of Cancer. This is the Mother's Daughter moon, and these names come from Raven Caldera's Moon Phase Astrology. It is a really cool book. I highly recommend it. If you love doing astrology, you want to get more into lunar phaseology, it's great. Meditate on a parent who is the same gender as you. How are you similar and how are you different? Note that I have an asterisk next to parent. I would say use this word to mean any person, whether that was somebody who is a blood relative, whether that was someone in your immediate community, or whether that was someone culturally who felt like a parent to you. A lot of folks refer to RuPaul as Mama Ru. Now, RuPaul is a problematic figure. I'm not saying that they're perfect. That's just the first person that came to mind as an example. But they are a proud, awesome, black, not trans, but drag queen. They have been a mother to an entire generation of queer kids figuring out, how do I want to present myself to the world? So this parent doesn't have to be somebody that you even have met, but somebody that you feel very, very closely to, that has felt like a parent to you, and is of the same gender, the same sex orientation, that has a sameness about them that you really deeply relate to. How are you similar to this person, and how are you different from this person? And just use this as like a free journaling exercise kind of thing. And then on the full moon, grandmother's moon. And here, I want you to write a letter to an actual blood ancestor, somebody who is genetically related to you, somebody who physically, so here's what we're talking about, is under the Cancer moon, we are talking about people who ultimately produced you, whether they physically produced you, culturally produced you, philosophically produced you. They helped produce you. They helped in you coming to be here on the physical plane. Full moon Capricorn grandmother's moon, we are talking about people who physically produced you. We're talking about people that ultimately put their genetics together, that something you. and you were the result. Write a letter to a blood ancestor, mail it or burn it. And so with that, mail it or burn it, you can see that it's, you decide what kind of work you want to do in that letter. You decide what kind of message, is this a message of thanks? Is this a message of reconciliation? Is this a message of rebuking? What? You decide what kind of work you want to do with that, given what's happening before and what's happening after. Okay. Let's move on. Tarot helpers. Okay. This is going to be another one where I'm going to read a ton of stuff to you, and then we'll talk about it. So I'm going to talk a lot, and then I'm going to talk a lot. Okay. Tarot helpers. The tarot helpers that we are working with this year, or at this time of year, are the Chariot and the High Priestess. Hey, haven't we mentioned the Chariot already? What the fuck? Man, this magic shit, I tell you what. Okay. These cards are so packed with information that I literally can and will be teaching a 2-hour class on just the High Priestess, though we will talk about the Chariot in that class as well. But that's how much information there is in one of these cards that I can talk about it for 2 hours. Okay. The Chariot is the major arcana card that is associated with the sign of Cancer. The High Priestess is the major arcana tarot card that is associated with the planet, quote unquote, the moon. The moon rules Cancer. This is why we are working with these two cards and these two cards together. If you want some other cards that you can work with at this time of year, you can also include the Lover's card, which is ruled by Gemini, the Magician card, which is ruled by Mercury, and that is the ruling planet of Gemini, as well as the 8 of Swords, 9 of Swords, and 10 of Swords for all of your Gemini work, and the 2 of Cups, 3 of Cups, and 4 of Cups for all of your Cancer work. Okay. As we move from Gemini into Cancer, we work with 4 different cards describing various parts of the conversation between the superconsciousness, the subconscious, and the self-conscious. We start by witnessing the influence of intuition and inner will on our perceptions, but we can fall into the trap of assuming that this is coming from us. However, as we open up ourselves to the process of bringing our own voice down and listening to what's left, which is partially a reflection of the universe and shared experience, we can be overwhelmed with our own apparent insignificance and the general suffering in the world as we try to rationalize the chaos of existence. When we learn to be a temple to spirit and allow these forces to flow through us, we come together and we come closer to our reason for living. Only when we quiet the mind and open our hearts, witnessing the bounty of life and the mysteries of the universe, can we come into the place where the universe is presenting exactly what we need to us because we are in tune with exactly what the universe needs from us. But we will only learn these valuable lessons by descending down into the physical plane and living a life with all the highs and lows of that experience. So, coming back to the Lovers and the Magician card being involved with this season, the Magician and the High Priestess are described by some tarot authors as the spiritual mother and father of the soul. The emperor and the empress, who we have already worked with this year, are thought of or described by some authors as the physical mother and father of the soul. So the magician and the high priestess, spiritual mother and father of the soul. Okay, well, let's go back for a second and talk about our constellation of Cancer. We already know that this is described by the Chaldeans 5, 6, 7,000 years ago as the gate of man. This is the place where souls descend down from heaven into a physical body to come and do whatever it is that that person's going to do in life. So we have these two characters as overseers of that process, protectors, we might even say, of that process. And on the other side, we have the Chariot. And, and above that, or along with that, we have the Lover's card. So we have two beings coming together in the Lover's card. Even the name implies that these two beings are coming together, right, to create a third thing. And here is that third thing, the Chariot, this being driving the Chariot. Okay. Another word that we hear used to describe this card and to describe the state that we are in this card is Merkaba or Merkaba. This is from Kabbalistic magic, and it literally means the vehicle of the soul. So here we are seeing all of our archetypal imagery meshing into one great big concept. We have this process, and let me step back a little bit because I don't think I emphasized this enough. I'm gonna talk about it more in a second, but part of our Gemini symbolism that we work with is the divine twins, the divine couple. Okay, so we've seen the divine couple, right? We've seen that manifested and imagined in a bunch of different holidays and rituals around the planet. Okay, but it's also the divine twins. And we see that within the description of the constellation and the sign itself. In the Yoruba myth tradition, as well as a couple of other world traditions, twins are always thought of as being divine, and they are always thought of as being protectors of a third entity, which is usually either a mother goddess, a solar goddess, or both. Could be an ocean goddess. But they come first to be the protectors of this third thing. So we have a lot of 2 to 1, 2 on either side of 1. And if we even look at the symbolism on the High Priestess card, we literally see 2 pillars that are identical and opposite from each other. They're the same and they're different, but they're the same, but they're different, but they're the same, but they're different. On either side of this one entity, this one deity in the middle, the goddess, with all of her water flowing forth, her skirts literally turn into water. And if you were here for the Empress card class, the answer to your homework question, what's the deal with the water in the background of the Empress cards, this is where that source of water begins, is with the High Priestess. And we see this source of water move through most of the rest of the major arcana cards. So we're seeing this imagery over and over and over again. And in the Chariot card, we're literally seeing this hard shell, like a crab, with a squishy interior, that would be the soul, coming into its drive, coming into its power, grasping the reins of the chariot and heading out into the world to try to go make some stuff happen. There is so much symbolism on the Chariot card. It's like, I don't even know where to begin sometimes. The canopy of stars over the Chariot card, I think it's not going to be much bigger if I do it this way. The canopy of stars over the Chariot card is literally the canopy of stars. It's literally the universe filtering down. We see they have a crown of 5 stars on their head, or 5 pointed stars on their head, which is earth, air, fire, water, in alignment with spirit as Wiccans use it. They have crescent moons, waxing and waning crescent moons on their shoulders, connecting them with the goddess. They have the top of their chariot, the roof of their chariot is held up with 4 pillars. That's all of the 4 paradigms and 4 dimensions that we use in magic, the 4 elements, the 4 directions, the 4 archangels, the 4 watchtowers, etc., etc. They have a belt around their waist that is the zodiac, and it's even tilted in the way that the zodiacal belt is tilted here in the solar system. And on their chariot, we see multiple symbols of union. The lingam yoni right there on the shield in the very center, underneath the winged sun. We see the Sphinx that are going to be pulling the chariot. One is black in white, one is white in black. On and on and on. So much symbolism here. It's really, really incredible. So, very powerful, very potent archetype to work with at this time of year. And again, we're seeing, between all of these signs and all of these symbols, this union of our archetypes. We have the divine twins. Thanks for coming, Bill. We have the divine twins protecting over a mother goddess type deity that is ultimately going to be breaking the waters and producing forth and abundance and fertility and plenty and production and growth. And within this chariot symbolism, ultimately this being the baby, the being that is being brought forth, the thing, the project that is being brought forth. And with the Chariot card, it's fast-paced. It's quick victory that doesn't necessarily last. Very Holi King. Like, that was fun. Let's get out of here before they catch us. Kind of sounds like the protest, doesn't it? But all of that. We're getting so much of that in both of these cards. Okay. So, almost there. All right. A little bit more about the astrology, a little bit more history behind this symbolism stuff, and then we're going to get into the last little bits of this Litha class. Okay, so the twins and the gate of man. Castor and Pollux, the 2 boys in the constellation of Gemini, were twins born of 2 different fathers but one mother. One holy, one mortal. And so we have had this kind of symbolism repeated to us over and over again this evening. When Castor was killed, Pollux traded his immortality to spend half of his life on Earth and half in the underworld, in both accounts with his best friend. Or lover, whatever, it's cool. The 2 boys were horsemen. They were called Dioscuri, and they were star-crowned. They were revered by sailors who believed the gods to manifest in St. Elmo's fire, or the electric charges that would dance over a ship's rigging as they passed through storms. Remember, we have so many holidays at this time of year around shipping, sailing, fishing, traveling by sea, as well as the feast day of Elegua, who is a sky god that protects travelers, is in the embodiment of electricity. Okay. In some accounts, the 2 boys are Apollo and Hercules. In others, it is Horus the Younger riding on the back of Horus the Elder. And that really makes me think of Vishnu riding on Garuda. In others, it is the Hindu Yama and Yami twins, cosmic twins and lovers, the primordial progenitors of the species. And in some of the descriptions of Isis and Osiris, they're twins. They're husband and wife, but they are also brother and sister, and sometimes they're described as twins as well. So we see this same symbolism swirling around us over and over and over again. The Roman word for siblings who share a mother but have different fathers was di Germani, and translated to true sibling. Yem, Y-E-M, means to pair or to press. A common ancient symbol for Gemini was a pile of bricks. Masonry's leading archetype is Hermes, the cognate of Mercury, and a herm is a cairn or a pile of stones. Some twins are known as the founders of cities, like Remus and Romulus. The constellation of Cancer is also known as the Gate of Man, as we have talked about. Is there something? There's always more. There's always more. Okay. It is thought to be the place in the sky where souls come down to inhabit Earth. It has also been seen as the breastplate of the high priest, the manger, and the beehive, as it is filled with over 1,000 dim stars. But before the constellation was a crab, it was a scarab. And now, before I get into this, this constellation has also been called, as I said before, the crayfish or the lobster. And if we think through the major arcana all the way up to the moon card, which is ruled by the sign of Pisces, just to keep things confusing, but the moon card, we actually see at the bottom of that card a crab or usually a lobster or a crayfish crawling up out of the water and onto land. Pretty good. Okay. Before the constellation was a crab, it was a scarab. Scarabs were worshipped by Egyptians for thousands of years. They believed scarabs guided the sun across the sky, just as they rolled little balls of dung across the desert. We now know that scarabs are capable of navigating across the desert by following the light of the Milky Way and other stars. True story, look it up. Scarabs get their name from the Egyptian god Khepri, whose name means one who creates himself or themself, and as the sun creates itself anew at summer solstice. Karabos, that word is also connected to this constellation, and it can mean a small boat. And the word Khepri, as I said, means one who is coming into their own, one who is deciding to manifest here in the world. So we have very much that idea of a soul descending from heaven and coming down into a physical body. I'm coming in, I'm coming to do this, I'm coming out, I'm presenting, I'm coming out of the abstract and becoming physical and showing you myself. But that name Khepri also means to shape something on a potter's wheel, which links us back to our clay symbolism within the word yem and yemeni, which is to press clay bricks, to make copies over and over and over with a press. So I just love the swirling of that symbolism. I love the swirling of all of these archetypes working together to ultimately create conditions that are fecund and abundant, but also protected enough and sanctified, holified enough that a soul is brought down, is tempted to come down from the heavens and come be here on the physical plane. And what better time? I mean, other than the climate is collapsing, the economy is collapsing, and all of our social structures are collapsing. Other than that, this is a fantastic time to come and manifest on Earth. We've got all kinds of fruits and flowers, and the air smells good. There's hours and hours and hours of sunlight. It's a fantastic time. Okay. Quickly, as usual, let's scooch through these last little bits of reference material. So, as you are doing your ritual tomorrow, or whenever you do your summer solstice ritual, if you are setting up altars or work tables in your home or workplace or wherever you are out in the world, doesn't matter, here are some elements that you can bring in that are going to resonate with all of these different energies that we've been talking about for this last 2.5 hours. Okay. Running between two bonfires or jumping a fire. Walking through a naked garden. I'll get to the animal helpers in a minute. Walking naked through a garden. I will tell you in every single class, if there's no other way that you worship, go outside. Go outside and go be in nature for a while. Watch a sunrise, watch a sunset, get rained on, smell the wind, lay down on the earth and smell the dirt. Do something. Go touch the earth. Go hang out with earth. Let it show you how it is manifesting the season. Let it show you. Feel it and be present with it. Renewing vows, keeping a candle lit for 24 hours, communing with fairies. And I just recently discovered something about working with fairies. You're not supposed to thank them, which I thought was very odd. And that's definitely something that's been pressed into me. You always say thank you. If you're working with who or whatever you're working with, you always say thank you. Apparently, according to Irish tradition, you don't say thank you to fairies because of course, they're elementals. They're not sparkly little sprites. They're hardcore elementals. And you don't say thank you because it implies that there is, that you owe them something now for the work. So work with that in your own paradigm. But I thought that was a very interesting piece of information that I had just come across. So communing with fairies, divining with fire, conducting rituals at noon instead of late at night, because of course that's when the sun is at its zenith. Staying up all night, that is a very traditional form of worship for summer solstice. Torchlight processions, walking a labyrinth, gathering and drying herbs, paper boats, and protection magic. These are all very traditional forms of worship and observance at Litha and during Litha season for the next 6 weeks or so. Symbols that you might work with, or animals that you might work with at this time of year: dragon, a white horse, a crab, obviously, whale, or any deep ocean creatures, really. Camel, swan, and scarab. The camel and the swan both connect to the high priestess in ways that we don't really have time to talk about here, but go look up some Hebrew. Incense and oils for this time of year. Kifi, if you can, or kaifi, if you can find, this is a blend. It is an ancient Egyptian blend. There is much argument over exactly what is supposed to go in it, but I will tell you this. If it does not have wine and grapes and honey in the mix, it's not a true kaifi or kifi. However it's pronounced, it's not true. It's got to have red wine, grapes, honey mixed into it. It's definitely red wine and grapes. In the incense, it's got to have it in there. Otherwise, it's not the authentic stuff. Sage, and of course culinary sage is an excellent stand-in for white sage. Don't worry about white sage. Culinary sage works just fine. You can also use clary sage for that sage. Roses, definitely. Myrrh, obviously, is one of the great all-time goddess scents and resins that are out there. Lilies, honeysuckle, and mistletoe berries. Mistletoe berries, mistletoe is not actually producing berries right now. So if you have any dried from winter, mistletoe berries represents the semen of gods. So there you go, a little spunk on the altar for the kids. Food and drink. Literally anything that is ripe right now, anything that is in season, anything that is producing abundantly, eat that. Drink that. Yams, corn, all citrus fruits, all seasonal fruits and veg. Wild thyme is really lovely to work with at this time of year, as well as parsley. Anything that comes from sunflowers. So seeds, the petals, sunflower oil, all of that good stuff. Mace. And there is a traditional drink from this time of year that Greeks and Romans would have consumed, and it was called Posca, Posca. And this is basically fresh cold water with a little bit of red wine vinegar added to it, some honey, and then a collection of herbs. Fennel, coriander, a bunch of seeds like that. And on the surface, it sounds kind of funky. It is actually really frickin' refreshing during the hot portions of the year. And some people make it where it practically tastes like kombucha. It's like super, super sour. Other people will make it where there's just like a couple of tablespoons of vinegar and honey in a whole bunch of water. So experiment with it. Vinegar, honey, water, all very cheap. So go at it. Look up Posca, Posca. That's the name of the drink. You will find a bajillion different recipes for it online. Really, really great, delicious, also traditional drink for this time of year. Mineral helpers. Okay, so working with stones at this time of year, what all do we have? We've got carnelian, citrine, moonstone, sunstone, selenite, mother of pearl, aquamarine, and tiger's eye. This is a very, very, very short list. Carnelian, citrine, sunstone, And Tiger's Eye, actually, and Aquamarine all really align us with solar energies, our thrust, our yang, our extrovert energies, and Moonstone, Selenite, Mother of Pearl are all, and Aquamarine, oddly enough, are all going to help align us with our lunar energies, our inward, our introvert, our interior, our yearning, all of that good stuff. So those are really great stones to work with at this time of year. But I would say if you want to work with, if you don't, whatever you have in your house, really, shells are also a fantastic, that's why I put Mother of Pearl, but any kind of shell at all is a fantastic way of bringing in goddess energy right now. And any kind of thrusty, phallic shaped stone, no matter what the stone is going to be really fantastic as a god stand in. I tend to not actually put statues of deities on my altars, and I tend to usually only use natural elements to represent gods and goddesses. But that's my jam, and every now and then I will definitely look at pagan altars, and I'm like pretty jealous over some of the really cool statues that I see people have. So my point is, whatever you've got in your house, if you have a blue glass bowl that you fill with water, and then you put a wooden spoon next to it, that's a goddess and a god, as far as I'm concerned. So use your imagination with how it is that you represent these things. But these are some great stones that you can work with to help align with this energy. Also, if you're feeling a little out of balance, if you're getting too much solar, bring in the lunar. If you're getting too much lunar, bring in the solar. Plant helpers at this time of year. Marigold, holly, ash, St. John's wort, but it's St. Joan, come on. Mugwort, chamomile, rue, fern, heather, blackthorn, and yarrow. Yarrow is absolutely coming into its season right now. Yarrow can be used for so much stuff. But St. John's wort helps with depression. It helps with loss of libido and lack of energy. And it is a really fantastic herb to take during the winter, which is interesting because St. John's worts can make you sensitive to sun. So there's a very interesting symbol here of gathering this herb when the sun is the highest, but using the herb when the sun is the lowest to bring in some of that solar yang energy, optimism, happiness, alleviation from depression and sadness. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, last but not least, why didn't I do that? I'm a weird person. Okay, a couple of more symbols for you to work with at this time of year. Fire, bonfires, pairs of things, water, a cauldron filled with water, a burning wheel, the wheel of the year, sundials, and henges. The burning wheel, very traditional at this time of year in ancient pagan tradition, to light a burning wheel on fire and roll it down the tallest hill in the area. So, the good people of Madison Valley here in Seattle will be coming for you because Roy Street is the steepest hill that we've got in the city. So we're going to be bringing that old time religion to you shortly. But the idea was literally that you were seeing the sun at the apex and then descending down while on fire. Plus also, rolling a giant wheel on fire down a hill. That's just badass. And I'm always going to be down to be involved in something like that. So, okay. All right. Our meditations. These are mine. They're original to me, but they are inspired by the Book of Hours by Galen Jalot. Really fantastic Book of Hours. It's very much like a missal or missive from Catholics, where there's like prayers for morning, noon, and night, prayers for every day of the week, prayers for every portion of the season, the full moon, the new moon, all that stuff, but all for pagans. And there's a book for goddesses and a book for gods. And they're beautiful. They're really well put together, and I really like them. Okay, so think of all of the energy you radiate. How do you share your gifts? We all have the capacity to nurture. What does nurturing look like for you. Explore the wild expanse of reality and of your own spirit. What would help you progress on your path? All right, that's it. We've made it all the way through to the end. Happy Litha, happy Midsummer, happy summer solstice. If there was ever a time that the gods and the goddesses, that the good people of Earth, that the ancestors are crying out for us to embody these truths, to embody these gifts, it is now. If there was ever a time for you to force yourself to become a parent to yourself and to say, I cannot experiment any longer. I cannot dabble any longer. I cannot just stick a toe in and then retreat the moment that things get a little weird. Now is that time. Now is the time to commit. Now is the time to be the embodiment of these truths. Humanity and the world is crying out now for you, right now, to be the thing, to be the change, to be the spear, to be the sword, to be the shield, to be the mouthpiece that speaks the truth, to be the ear that listens as well. To be brave and in the face of all of this madness and darkness, to be hopeful and to be radiant and to be glorious. Now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the time. Blessed be. Happy Litha. Thank you for joining me. Have a great night, you guys. Bye. Bum 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 bum. Ba woo.